definitely at a low point, and that low point is where you have to get honest.
Many young people struggle to conform to society's expectations. They're labeled a rebel when they try to forge their own path. But at times, these paths can lead to negative outcomes: drug abuse, criminal activity, mental health challenges.
Me and a gun in a truck where I had to be honest about what got me there, about it all being me.
However, some individuals find a way to build a bridge over their troubled waters, and they emerge stronger and driven to help others find their way.
Are you living the life you want? Well, what do you want?
My guest today is one such individual.
Get clear on what you want. The most important question that a lot of people don't know.
Taylor Cavanaugh had a troubled youth, but he didn't let it destroy him. He found his calling first in the Navy SEALs, and after once again drowning in his demons and having to leave something he had dreamed about, he embarked on an even more unconventional path by joining the French Foreign Legion, becoming the first known person to serve in both elite units. Through these experiences, Taylor gained insights into himself and discovered a passion for helping others.
Take it seriously. Stop playing around. If you're really serious about your goals and being good for you and your family, all right, well, then do it.
This is Taylor's incredible story. Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast, and ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Taylor Cavanaugh, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Tony, I appreciate it, and I thank you everybody for watching.
Listen, I want to talk a little bit about your background, because I know Navy SEALs we're going to get to, one of your dreams, but your path to getting there wasn't exactly what I'd call perfectly paved. Take us back to that time before the Navy SEALs and how it helped shape the Taylor of today.
I had a pretty good childhood. I had parents that I knew loved me. They had their problems. Overall, it was very healthy. My parents were very active. That facilitated a little bit of an adventurous spirit. We traveled a little bit. We, go to the ocean, and my mom, as opposed to raising us in the house, she'd take us down to the tide pools and was pretty loose about letting us stay out and play and all that. We didn't have now that later down the road, probably that discipline probably would have been a little bit better for me. I would have stayed out of a little trouble, but that gave me a very strong constitution. And my sister as well. I have a younger sister named Isla. We both have that strong, adventurous spirit. Led me into high school and all those different things, sports, and, a little bit of trouble along the way. But I was overall a pretty good student. And I just started to stack up some problems, getting kicked out of high school and some other things, and led me into college. And those problems continued. I never really fixed here, Tony. I think I was immature. Some people are old souls. I am not an old soul. And I had a lot to learn. This life was definitely a big level up for me, because I had a lot of friction points and moments, like you said, that I just didn't see that it was going to work out.
You talk about getting into trouble, getting kicked out of high school. I mean, you're a good student. Your parents have kind of set you up to be adventurous. What unwired that and sort of had you go down these different paths?
I don't think it ever became unwired. It was just wired that way, because I wasn't ever told to do my homework. I wasn't ever, and I always did it. Even when I was getting kicked out of school, I was still an academic All-American. It was this weird juxtaposition of me. I didn't like sucking at stuff. So I was like, well, I'm going to be good at school. I'm going to be good at sport. I just never knew that you couldn't not do that stuff. But I also like to push the pace. I have that, let's push it a little further. I don't like being bored. That's the other piece, is I was just fucking bored, man. And so I like to push the pace, and partying and girls and all that stuff was way more fun. So I did that too.
Were you more manic, or were you a combination of different mood swings? Like, to me, you strike me a little bit like my dad when he was in a manic state, which is, I want to put 28 hours in a 24-hour day.
I've always been pretty positive. I would say I've seen real manic. My dad, I would say, is probably on that spectrum. I likely have a little bit of a blend from my mom, who's a little bit more of that even keel. But I stay pretty wired for sound for the most part. I would call manic up and down. I'm just pretty much up.
And for a high achiever, what was it like to be kicked out of your high school? I mean, again, you're an all-American student, you're a great athlete, you're popular. What was it suddenly to realize that the cards weren't always going to be played the way you wanted to play them?
For me, getting kicked out of school was like, whatever, because I just went over to the other school where I had the same result. But here's the kicker. The not playing lacrosse the senior year, I didn't really see the magnitude that would have on my sports career in college. Because I just didn't understand that, oh, now Notre Dame in North Carolina is not calling anymore. I actually have a daughter on the way this year, and I know some of the trappings. I'm going to guide a lot harder on, hey, here's the right decision here. And I'm not putting that on my parents. I'm just saying that wasn't just kind of talked about. I was always very forward driving in my own shit. But who knows if I would have listened to it anyway if I did get it.
Have you ever unpacked it with your parents, what you were like as that sort of young individual? Because to me, sometimes parents just shake their head and say, there's not a lot I can do when someone is driving 150 miles an hour in so many different directions.
My mom is a teacher, single mom. It's tough, though, as a woman to raise a man. My dad wasn't around. Because he had been in and out, I wasn't listening to him anyway. He had his own problems. It was challenging for my mom because I just did what I wanted. I always worked. I always had money. That was the other piece. There was no real financial control. Yeah, I don't put it on my mom at all because I was pretty much doing my program.
So how did the Navy SEALs come about? Because to me, the story is this was something that was always out there for you. There's something that fascinated you. I'm just curious where that initial itch happened. And so few people actually scratch that itch. They kind of dream about going to be an astronaut but never do, or they dream about being a Navy SEAL but they never do. But you made it happen.
Yeah, I was 7 years old and I remember seeing them training. That moment embedded something in my soul. I was like, wow, you can be a commando as a job. So I researched a lot. I couldn't get enough of it. Green Berets, Men with Green Faces, Navy SEALs in Vietnam, Medal of Honor recipients and their stories. It was very powerful for me. And I didn't have a romantic vision of it. It wasn't something that I was like visualizing what the combat would be like in some romantic. I understood it as a very grimy, dirty job. That was tough to do and tough dudes did it. It was like, okay, I'm going to do it, but later because I have to go to school. Now I got to go to college. And so I was like, all right, I got to check all these boxes.
And so how does that, I mean, you graduate college that, suddenly there's a lot of paths that are opening up to you. You're self-reliant, you know that you've made a variety of things happen for you in your life. How did that become the magnetic draw versus all the other things you could have done?
I didn't see any other option. I danced with the idea. I had gone to a pre-law major, but I wanted a gun and I wanted to deploy. It was as simple as that. Well, the only place you can do that is the military. So that's when I started down the path of the Marines. But I had gotten in so much trouble through college and through all this stuff that I was on probation from a DUI. I had gotten in a bunch of fights and a lot of stuff, all misdemeanors, but a lot of them. And so when I was going through the administrative process, I had to go to jail to get off probation and voluntarily, mind you, I wasn't being sent to jail. I requested to go to jail to commute my probation. So that was a whole process, being 23, new college graduate, checking into jail for 4 months in a lockdown facility, 23-hour-a-day lockdown facility in Santa Cruz County.
How did you come to terms with that? I mean, you're like this wild animal, and all of a sudden you're 23 hours a day, you're locked into a facility. How did you survive? Because, I mean, even though it seems like a short period of time, that must have been eternity for someone like you.
I didn't mind it because I thrive on program. I still had hope, right? I was in there for a reason. So it wasn't like I got in trouble and was in there. It probably would have been a different situation. But I was like, all right, cool. Now I can clear this stuff up. I wrote, I read, worked out. I volunteered to do jail laundry. So I was washing jail laundry for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that gave me a little freedom of movement and time to read and get separated out of the cell.
And so you get out of jail. Why would the military take a chance on Taylor?
Well, they didn't want to. And then, no, a lot of people didn't. The Army said no. The Marines said no. And the Navy was the only one that would give me a shot. And I didn't tell them about me going to jail. Well, a lot of people don't know. There are a ton of gaps in the background check system. A ton. It's tightened up a little bit. But we're also at war. So it was a little bit looser. I was told even there, they're like, there's no way you're going to get a secret clearance. Top secret clearance, definitely not. Right. And then you're never going to be able to get through MEP there's a lot of gaps, and so there was a lot of strategic answering, and it was stressful, man, without a doubt. But I was not getting the high fives on the way in, that's for sure. I needed conduct waivers, I needed letters of recommendation from SEALs, active duty SEALs, and it took me about better part of a year before I got a contract.
And how did you go from not wanted to actually getting in the Navy SEAL program?
Well, it was through repetition and hard work and showing up. There was a process called delayed entry processing. I won't get into it now, but you sign up for the Navy, they give you a regular job, and I could have like almost no jobs because of my background. I had a very kind of a menial job in the Navy. Then I had the opportunity before that ship date, which was like a year later, to get my SEAL contract. And so that entailed, I sought out, they had a SEAL motivator who worked for Naval Special Warfare in Southern California. Sought him out, worked out with him and the group every day, the whole time while I was stacking boxes at Home Depot at night, taking physical screening tests down at the Naval Amphibious Base. I'm like, all right, where are they actually doing these tests? I'm going to show up. So I showed up every week for 40 weeks in a row and got elevated scores on the SEAL physical screening tests. And finally, they offered me a contract for a SEAL challenge contract. And that's what I ended up going into the Navy on.
You talk about navigating the challenges strategically, even during that SEAL process, isn't something that you do well. Talk to me about how you found a way through this, because it sounded like it required a lot of discipline. I'm going to show up every week. I'm going to continue to prove who I am.
The thing is discipline when I get locked on isn't the problem. Right? And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just do this now because this is the end goal. And that's why anybody listening, you always got to have that goal set. Or anybody who's got some of the character traits that I have, it's easy to get off the path when you're not working for something clear. And I was feeling good. I was in a great psychological state and very focused. I didn't talk to anybody. I turned off my phone. I changed myself. I completely went off the grid in a period of isolation for this piece. Really, till I became a SEAL. For the most part, I was pretty locked on for about 2.5 years.
Hollywood certainly has glamorized, who the SEALs are and why they matter. But how tough was it to run that gauntlet and go from getting the contract to actually becoming a Navy SEAL?
It's the volume. Right? Anybody can do this stuff one day, but can you do it for a year and a half? They're like your legs. I've seen people's legs break, compound fracture out of their legs from their bones breaking from running so much. I've seen people seizure from the cold. I've seen some pretty gnarly stuff. I knew exactly where I needed to be because I had already gone to jail and done all this stuff that I was like, there was no way I was quitting. It was my last option. And I had painted myself into that psychological corner. That's important for people, is I didn't give myself a plan B, because the plan B is the path of least resistance. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. Way harder. I thought it was going to be hard, but I had no idea just how much self-doubt, fear of failing. Right? Not even quitting, but actual failing times and obstacle courses was very real.
You become a Navy SEAL and that dream is realized, but it unravels. What happens?
I was there for about 7 years. SEAL Team 7 for 7 years, multiple deployments and accolades. And here's why I could lie to myself. It's because I was doing well professionally and then partying hard. A living for today type mentality, and not really understanding the gravity of actions and having all these things in place. Like I wasn't drinking and driving. I wasn't doing this. I'm like, I'm good. But then, get in a bar fight one time, and then I get in another altercation a couple years later, and now I have a bunch of heat on me. Right? I have a top secret clearance. I've gone to jail twice while in the SEAL teams. But so it brought a lot of heat on by Navy JAG. Navy JAG was like, fuck this guy. Right? And good on them. They're like, man, and the SEAL teams tried to protect me. But I didn't leave them a lot of ground to stand on. They tested me for drugs, which I passed. And then they tested me for steroids, which I fucking lit that up all the way. Ton of different performance enhancing drugs I was on. So that's looked at as zero tolerance in the Navy. Took it on the chin. I admitted to it. There's no denying it. I had a lawyer and we worked it out, and I took a general discharge.
Where's your mental state afterwards? Because 7 years, everything you've done, everything, the accolades you've received, but you now walk out and that program, that process, the discipline, everything that you thrive under is taken away from you. What happens?
That was a terrible feeling when that whole process was happening, because it wasn't just that. I had also legal problems outside, but that was like least of my concerns. It was really losing my SEAL career, which I ended up doing. I ended up losing. And that was a powerful moment of where's my identity? I had wrapped it up in something external of me, which is always very dangerous. I caution people that I work with how in my message is always validate yourself off of your daily habits in you. That can't be taken away from you. Don't try to validate yourself off of some external title, which is water. That was a dangerous place to psychologically tie yourself to. I hit a dark point. It wasn't so bad when I walked out of the Navy because I had stepped into another job and was like ready to start a new career. So I was psychologically good. At least I honestly thought. But the minute I got out of the Navy, I started stacking on some really bad habits. Doing Adderall, Xanax, alcohol, weed, all these things daily. I didn't see the problem with that, which ended up fucking me.
When we return, after his Navy career, his entire world crumbles around him. Taylor has to make a choice. Does he let the darkness consume him, or does he find a way to light a new path? And you won't believe the dangerous path he chooses. That and my 3 takeaways. Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. I'd like to give a big shout out to RBC's Future Launch, a $500 million decade-long commitment to help prepare 3 million youth for the future of work. And how? Providing young people access to meaningful employment through work experience, skills development opportunities, networking solutions, and mental well-being support and services. Powering today's youth for the jobs of tomorrow, that matters to RBC.
We talk a lot about, man, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, man. Keep going, keep that progress. Yes, that's all important. But what a lot of people don't talk about is that required downtime when you're licking your wounds, when you're in that process of that self-audit, when you're taking that analysis of what went down, where it went wrong, where you're at. That's just as important, man.
Today, my special guest is Taylor Cavanaugh, and his life, it reads like a screenplay, one that starts in chaos, descends into darkness, and then climbs back to the light through discipline and purpose. This dark period, you got more and more of these demons are taking hold of you, but then this French Foreign Legion happens. And this is why I was so fascinated, because when I understand, you're probably the only person on this planet that's been both a SEAL and somebody that's been part of the French Foreign Legion.
Yep, only one.
How did that even factor into your brain, and how did you go about becoming one?
I started looking into it when I got out of college because I was having so much friction to get into the United States military. I thought, well, if I need to go in the military and have no other option, this will be an option.
Yeah.
Now, moving fast forward, losing my job, my life, everything, my identity, I was suicidal in my truck, really at a low point. And that low point is where you have to get honest. You got nothing else to soften the blow. Me and a gun in a truck where I had to be honest about what got me there, about it all being me. So I said, well, I put that suicidal thought off the thing because I was really realized how selfish it would be to my family and other things and friends and stuff. I would leave a lot of destruction. So I said, well, if I'm going to go reset this, let's go do something hard again. Let's go write an amazing story. From that moment, very soon after, I was in France.
Flying to France to go, okay, that's where the French Foreign Legion is. But how does that turn into you knocking on their door and having them even consider you, given what was in your knapsack? I mean, yes, you're talented, accomplished, bright, intelligent, but there's a lot of boxes you wouldn't get check marks for.
Well, that's what the Foreign Legion is designed for. Since antiquity, 200 years old, it took on murderers and criminals and the ruffians of society. And it is hard. They only select 1 out of 15 guys that come to the gate. And I wanted to go back in the military and get a gun again. And I had never heard of a Navy SEAL being a French Foreign Legionnaire. And I really wanted to find out what it was all about. There's no application. There's no anything. You just go knock on the door with your bag and give them your passport.
And why do you think they chose you?
The interview process is very, very detailed. First off, they do the medical, right? Legs, feet, eyes, teeth, all these things they need to be really locked on. They kick people out for anything. Then the physical stuff, which is fine. The interview process is where dudes fumble it because they need to understand a very important question, which is, who the fuck are you? Are you who you say you are? You can imagine, think of all the different countries. 150 nations are represented in the Foreign Legion. 150. They want to make sure you don't have sexual crimes, serious issues with Interpol. They want to make sure you are who you say you are. Then they're looking at military experience. I would say probably about 70% of guys have military experience who get selected. They don't want to have to teach guys from ground up. And if they do, they want the guys to be real young. So I was 34 going in. So it was good I had military experience. And also I just gave them, I'm good at the interview. I said, hey man, I fucked up my life and I need a second chance. So he's like, all right, like that checks out. They don't expect Boy Scouts to show up there. Then you get selected and sent to Foreign Legion selection boot camp.
And how was that compared to the Navy SEALs?
Totally different ball of wax. It's first off, it's boot camp. It's not SEAL selection. Basic infantry boot camp at the beginning. So that process is terrible. It's cold. It's a lot less funded. You're in the French Pyrenees running. I hate running. So that was walking into a lot of fear for me. And it may sound kind of simple to some people, but I was terrified of having to go run 20 miles a day again. But did it. Also, you don't know the language. So people with Russian accents speaking French to you or yelling at you, calling you God knows what, that adds a whole nother level of complexity.
When you got through it, you talk about finding your mojo there.
I started recognizing that my decisions matter to other people. I wanted to stop destroying my life. And it wasn't right away. It took me a few years in the Legion to really get this feeling back, to build back up, build my confidence back up, build my overall discipline back in the right ways. Here's what I did. I one day realized I still wasn't happy. And that was in the Foreign Legion barracks room. Now I'm looking at Ukraine to go contract in Ukraine. I'm also looking at African mercenary companies. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to just go down this rabbit hole. And I realized, where does this end? I'm just going to go from one unhappiness to another happiness and never fill this void of whatever I'm trying to find. I just started to look internal. I realized I needed to start building myself back up off just daily habits. And so that's when I started reading into philosophical principles, the Greek, samurai, started reading a lot of religious texts, started kind of diving into my own thought process and unlearning things. And that's when I started to restructure my mornings and that whole process.
You know, before we get into talking a little bit about what you're doing now, do you think the concept of the French Foreign Legion is something we could bring into society in general for youth that have maybe gone off the wrong path and are just really need a purpose, need to have a pursuit, as opposed to society immediately dismissing them as a bad seed, not wired the right way?
I absolutely think the Americans should have an American Legion. Make the selection very hard. Allow people to get out of prison and go there, right? Have the discipline be very strict, just like it is in the Foreign Legion. It's the strictest branch in the French military. Have it be rough and give people a second chance and let them prove themselves.
Talk to me now about some of the lessons you've learned. One of the ones you talk about is the importance of debriefing yourself, even in everyday life.
You know that Greek philosopher, and he said, the unexamined life is not worth living. People live and don't ever think about why they do certain things, why they did certain things, what they did was bad or what they should improve on. How do you know how to tighten the day if you don't know what went wrong specifically? I do mine in the morning from the day before. Perfect. And I go, okay, what did I do yesterday that I'm going to improve on today? It's a simple question. Doesn't need to be the whole day, but tighten that one thing up and don't do it again. Or attempt not to. And if you do that for 10 years, I have news for you. Your life will get 1,000 times better.
We talk about authenticity out there, and yet most people sort of create this false persona. But when I go to your YouTube channel, it's unedited, it's unbridled, it's just you, these stream of consciousness videos.
Keep winning. It's the only answer. You are absolutely going to have failures along the way. Along your path of winning, along that uphill path to success, right? To paradise. That road to paradise is uphill. You're going to experience some obstacles, some failures, but that's not losing. No, no, no. That is not losing. That's learning.
It's almost like you're journaling through video. Like I talk to a lot of people that come to terms with who they are as through journaling. You're putting it out there. You're not putting it in a piece of paper, hiding it in your desk table. You're just throwing it out to the world. So tell me why it matters to you and why you hope it matters to others.
I want to be a conduit, and I try to get connected with what's on my mind and then what I think will help people, right? It's not even so much about me. It's okay, what have I learned in this past few days? I do them twice a week. I've never missed an upload, Monday and Thursday. And I always, you're right. I only press record once and I never re-record, press stop or edit. I think that's beneficial because people can see really me. They can see that it's not anything built up. It is exactly, and I fucking mean it when I say it. I have some conviction behind what I say, and I record when I'm not feeling good. When I'm down about something, when I made mistakes on something. I always think, people try to put this highlight reel up. I try to put, some of it's good, but some of it's not fun. So it's a self-examination. I really try to dive into because I still have a lot of things I need to improve, really, and things that I need to unwind in my own thought process, and maybe it'll help somebody else.
And so talk to me about what you're doing, like your calling. I mean, you're at this point in life where you've got so much in your knapsack. You're spending time examining who you are. What do you hope to bring to the world? Well, how are people going to benefit from the words of Taylor Cavanaugh, from following some of the ideas that you bring out?
Everything boiled down in my message and my mission is empowerment. I want and need people to understand that their life and their reality is absolutely theirs to create and make. Their reality is exactly what they think they deserve. Once people start to understand that they are not a prisoner to their reality, that they can actually create their environment how they want, they can live in the mindset and the body they want. It might seem this massive, massive task, but that journey of 1,000 miles starts with that one step. It is exactly that. Once you get momentum on one thing, I always say start with the body, start with the wake up, start with the simple things. That momentum begets momentum. That velocity will start moving. We tighten the diet. We tighten the mind. We tighten our philosophical understanding. We tighten that stoic mindset. All these different pieces, once you start tightening, guess what? You start feeling good. And then once you're in alignment, also the goal setting. Man, are you living the life you want? Well, what do you want? Get clear on what you want. The most important question that a lot of people don't know. That is a root of most people's problem is they float. Right? They're floating on this boat. If you don't know which port you're sailing, no winds are favorable. It's so important. So you know what you need to be deliberate about is goal setting, and you can actually make those happen once you're self-actualized. Your habits have to be good. Your actions have to be good, and you have to be working efficiently and accurate.
Taylor, where do you see yourself? I mean, apply what you just said and manifest Taylor Cavanaugh 5 years from now. I've got my sense of what you might be thinking about, but I'm curious what's yours.
I want massive reach. I want my book done, movie done on it. I want my family set, right? I'm engaged now. I don't know if I have 1 or 2 kids. More money, more security for my family. I want to be in better shape. Multiple houses, one in the cold, one in the warm. And I want to be fulfilled. I want to be speaking on stages. And more importantly, I still want to be doing exactly what I'm doing now, coaching one-on-one with clients. That is where I get most of my purpose and how I spend most of my day. I just want more scope, more reach.
And as you find this success, are you worried that what's held you back in the past, as you start getting centered, as you start getting what you want, these demons return like they did in high school and in university in the Navy SEALs? Or do you feel now you're at a point in your life where you've learned enough to realize that sometimes 14 hours is a good day's work versus trying to put 28 into 24 hours in terms of burning the candle at both ends?
No, I don't burn the candle at both ends, and I never did. I didn't burn the candle enough before. That's the difference. I didn't work hard enough. So now I put in 19-hour days. But the demons are still there. They haven't gone. Now I understand them more. Purpose driven, not pleasure driven. Once I took out pleasure seeking and comfort, my life exploded. And so now I just derive pleasure from my purpose. Once somebody can get to that psychological state where they derive their pleasure from their purpose, the world it's unstoppable. You can manifest anything.
Did you ever think when you started reading about samurais and Greek philosophers, you would become one?
All great warriors are poets and philosophical because you see the life in a much different lens. You see it in a much different lens. I never really gave a shit how many push-ups or I never really had that meathead side. I'm still understand it, right? You still want to be strong. It's just what the importance is placed is something much greater.
So I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And, the first one was just a lesson in life. I think everybody should start applying this concept of the daily debrief. And not just to reflect on your day, but saying, what can I tighten? What can I change? What can I improve? And you said you start doing that, and before long, another analogy you used, that you got to take the first step before you run the marathon. So the daily debrief I thought was great. Second one, again, was the moment, which is this and I was just thinking, this guy just lives in the moment, the sense of validating who you are based on your daily habits, not what other people think. But then you just changed everything. The last 120 seconds of this interview where you really talked about the sense of the philosophy and the warrior and the poet and understanding life and realizing that we can empower ourselves and we can manifest what we want to be, but don't give yourself a plan B because that's your exit strategy. Just go after it. So for all of that and more, I do see a book in your future and I do see a movie and I do see you on stage and I do see you intimidating a lot of people because this roar that comes through you is one that if you just let it pass for a second and then listen to it, I think is a roar of a lot of great wisdom. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you.
Yes, Tony, I appreciate it, brother. If anybody needs to get a hold of me, TaylorCavanaugh.com.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.